You're listening to an exclusive podcast of Gold Hawk Fights Back for You on AM 740 Zoomer Radio. Gold Hawk Fights Back for You airs Monday to Friday, 11 to 1 on AM 740 Zoomer Radio.
Okay, it's 12:35 here on Zoomer Radio, and I'm welcoming into the studio someone that, if you're interested in the wind turbine issues, as we've been talking about them for, years now, as a matter of fact, Carmen Krogh. She has been researching all of the health effects, the various and sundry reports, and certainly has had a close look at the Health Canada wind turbines report. I can't remember the title. It's long and involved and politically inspired, but I think many people know what it is, and is here today to talk about that. Carmen, great to see you once again.
Thank you, Dale, for having me here.
Let me first ask you about expectations, and I've asked a number of people who've been engaged in this battle to recognize the health effects of wind turbines. For some people, if you're too close to wind turbines, how high were your expectations that something good might have come out of this report?
Well, I was hoping for more definitive results, a more definitive, or what I would call a robust study, but I recognized early on that the design of it had limitations. Health Canada themselves say that there are limitations. It wasn't going to prove causality, wasn't going to be definitive, and it would inform on policy. So I think we've seen those words come true.
Well, in other words, with all of those qualifiers, and this is what we've said before, it makes you question the value of the report from the word go. Here we have a report that says, and this is what the initial media report said as well, there's no connection at all. No connection between wind turbines and those who would be suffering from some of the ill effects of wind turbines, such as sleeplessness, perhaps tinnitus, perhaps an increase in blood pressure, all the things we've talked about for a couple of years. They say no connection at all. But then later in the report, they demonstrate that there is a connection. It's as if two different factions actually got together and wrote the report. You know, it's confusing because it does not have a central message.
Well, I was surprised to hear what they did not find as the big focus. Because when you look at, as you point out, when you look into the findings, they did find significant effects.
The very, very ones that we have been talking about for years, which include blood pressure, migraines, tinnitus, dizziness, perceived stress, measured hair cortisol, systolic and diastolic blood pressure. All of these things were demonstrated in the report, and yet still the report has the nerve to say right off the top, well, there's no connection. We can't prove causality.
Yes, and Health Canada said the design was not going to prove causality, which is that direct pathway from high noise levels.
Yeah.
What they found is the annoyance pathway, which is a bad word for people to understand, but it is a health effect in itself, and that pathway is where the cluster of symptoms are.
Well, annoyance, I mean, the way we use the word annoyance, we often take it to mean the newspaper, the paper boys threw the newspaper into the bushes and were annoyed by it. But annoyance has a medical definition, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and especially chronic or highly annoyed people will suffer the very cluster of symptoms that we see described internationally. So their findings are consistent with the research that's been shown internationally.
So, in other words, they're saying, well, there's no connection to health effects. Health effects have nothing to do with living too close to wind turbines, and yet there are, but annoyances can be reported.
Right.
So it becomes a semantical kind of argument, doesn't it? Oh, no, there are no health effects, none at all. Don't worry. Nothing going on here, no problem. However, there are these annoyances that are described quite clearly in the report in another section.
Yeah, and Health Canada themselves acknowledge community noise annoyance as a health effect.
Yeah.
World Health does. The industry it was an industry commissioned report in 2009. They acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So we have a whole host of acknowledgments that annoyance is a health effect. And so that finding is very significant. It was shown in the study, the Health Canada study, that around 35 decibels, you started to experience that. The statistical significance of the cluster of symptoms is very important.
So all the information is there. The proof is there. The indicators are there that
Right.
For some people, and it's not everybody, but it is a significant number of people, are affected by wind turbines. And the closer you are to the wind turbine, the more profound the effects are, the annoyances or health effects are. We don't see annoyances and health effects as synonyms, but they should be.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I'm also concerned that the children weren't looked at, because if we're seeing these effects in adults, and children are a vulnerable population group where we are aware that noise exposure in general to fetuses, babies, youth, and children can cause serious health effects. So this was a big oversight. One limitation that I do have quite a bit of concern about, that I think we're going to have a close look at the impacts of children.
Well, but who's going to do that? Now that we've had this $1.8 million Health Canada study supposedly on the health effects of wind turbines, we're not going to tomorrow get another study, are we? Not
No.
from the government, anyway.
No, and there was an expertise for children's research on the study.
Yeah.
So that could maybe be a very simple add-on. I'll mention one other thing. I found, I got the data. The Health Canada says you can obtain the data. The data doesn't reflect the kind of way that when you do research, you receive data. So we don't know distances, numbers of people, where like for how far away they are, what are the megawatt outputs of the turbines, all the various factors that influence the statistical findings. And I think that lack is very important as well, because it's hard as a researcher to analyze, other than what they've said they found statistically significant results, but yet we don't know enough.
Well, what are they
facts.
saying? Take our word for it. We found it,
Yeah.
but we're not going to share the data with you so you can look at it yourself?
And it looks like the way the data has been explained, that it was based on computer modeling again. And I'd really like to see a lot more specific information around that. They did some homes, but so we really are in a quandary here as to put a little bit of more detail into the findings, but we do know from their report that these are serious results.
But we're not going to get anything else out of this now, are we? I mean, is there any indication that Health Canada is going to produce some of the data or study this further? I think the Health Canada is saying, okay, that's done, let's move on to something else. I get that impression. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because I got clued into the importance of policy when colleagues and I met with senior people at Health Canada and at Natural Resources Canada back in the summer of 2009, and we were told it was policy. And we're seeing...
Well, what is that? What do you mean? Explain.
To have wind energy development in Canada.
Oh, so the policy counts. It doesn't matter what a study might say, right?
So that policy has to be looked at. So I have found that there is something called a technology roadmap, which its purpose is, these are the own words of the Canadian participants, that this is an industry-led, government-supported initiative to increase wind development in Canada. So I think that merits a hard look as to the study, like what will happen now with that roadmap that defines an industry-led, government-supported initiative.
Well, what do you think?
Well, I want to monitor it. I'm going to be monitoring it because the results that they found should merit action. Really,
yes.
we should have action.
Any reasonable person would think that, wouldn't they?
Yes. And the lack of studying children is a really important criteria here because turbines are moving closer into more what I would call commuting settlements. Like they're close to urban areas. There's people that travel from the east to Toronto that are in a more suburban area, and we've got lots of kids there. So I guess my next phase is they spent over $2 million.
Oh, it was over $2 million.
Yeah,
was
it's
it?
2.1 is the...
I shortchanged it.
Yeah. and I really want to know what the next steps are when we're faced with this overriding industry-led, government-supported process.
Well,
what are we going to do now?
So science isn't driving this at all. It's policy.
I believe so. We were told bluntly in 2009 that it was.
Well, if you look at the report, and I've looked at it several times, I'm thinking, am I stupid? Am I not getting this? Because I noticed the strange different wording in different parts of the report. To me, knowing what I'm discovering now over time about the report, it's as if the report was written and then a policy guy came in and rewrote the top of it to make it look like there was no connection between any health problems and wind turbines.
Yeah.
Call me suspicious. Did that cross your mind?
I felt that there was something missing, and I agree with you because why is the focus on what they didn't find?
Yeah.
The results are very good findings in terms of consistency with international
But they're
work.
kind of buried in the report in this overall message
That's
of
right.
don't worry, there's no problem at all.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
You're listening to an exclusive podcast of Gold Hawk Fights Back for You on AM 740 Zoomer Radio. Gold Hawk Fights Back for You airs Monday to Friday, 11 to 1 on AM 740 Zoomer Radio.
My guest is Carmen Krogh. She's has worked in many senior levels at Health Canada. She is a retired pharmacist, and most importantly to our conversation today, she's a founding member of the Society for Wind Vigilance. You've been involved in this for a long time.
Since the fall of 2008.
There you go.
So my retirement ended then.
Yeah, and then you really had to work hard,
Yeah, I
right?
really had to.
All right, here's Laura on the line from Eris. Laura, what are your thoughts on this?
I think there's something rotten in Denmark, if you don't pardon the expression. Yeah, who's at the bottom of this? It's a foreign company that's pushing for these things to be put up out here, isn't it? Isn't it?
Well, I don't think it's that simple. Carmen, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's a wish to have a lot of wind turbines as an alternative, and so there's an overriding push to have that happen. And along the way, I think there were assumptions made that certain setback levels were going to be safe, and we're now seeing that they're not.
Yeah.
This happens with drugs a lot. You start out with a premise, certain dose, and sometimes after a while you realize it's not the right amount.
Yeah,
So
but in those cases,
you
Carmen, it
adjust.
gets changed.
It gets changed.
Nothing has changed here.
Yeah,
that's the
correct.
difference, yeah. Laura, thanks very much. I think something odoriferous in the state of Denmark might be somewhat appropriate. Speaking of the amount of wind energy, I mean, it says right in this report, it talks about 20% of our energy needs being fulfilled by wind turbines in Canada. That's that's a breathtaking amount of energy to come from wind turbines, isn't it? Are we to take that then as government policy?
The government has said they don't have a formal or official policy, but the roadmap,
Yeah.
the wind technology roadmap does identify that desire. I'd like someone to calculate how many wind turbines
Well, that
that
was my
would
next
take.
question.
Yeah, I
Can
don't
you
know.
imagine?
I think it would be a huge number, and it'd be interesting. Someone with mathematical skills out there could calculate that.
Well, dare say we would ask the government to do that. But
Okay.
I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Here's Joyce on the line from Hagersville. Joyce, what do you think?
Well, we've been trying to figure this out. At first, I thought it was a great idea, and then I started to do some research on it. And then the neighborhood got together and did some research with electricians and stuff. And then we went to all the meetings and supplied them with the health reports and the electrical reports and stuff. And they just said, well, they come down to the last. They just said, well, our specialist says that your specialist is wrong.
Yeah, right.
And then they, if you want some nightmare reading, everybody please read the Green Energy Act. So nightmare reading for 3 or 4 days at night, and find out that it's written like a grade 6, and it says if there's anybody that fights against it, it'll be to an arbitrator, and if there still is not an agreement, then it goes that the government has the last word, and they will side on the side of the energy.
And
now, I happen to be right beside an interconnect station that has just went in.
Oh, yeah?
I have had a very...
What is that, an interconnect station? What do you mean?
It's when they have put poles from the Fisherville project and Samsung and all them down the road with 240,000 volt wires to an interconnect station where it connects to Hydro One towers.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm lucky to be beside one that they've put in.
Great.
I'm in the country. I thought I was going to have a wonderful retirement home with nobody around and that, but I've now got a big interconnect station that is well lit up at night. No more darkness for me.
Yeah, so much for that. Eh?
And also, my concern is when I was listening to you, is we were fighting about health things and everything, but I have had, like I'm in my 60s, I've only had one tablet that I need to take a day, so I think that was pretty good. And that was for a light blood pressure problem. And in June, all of a sudden everything went haywire. And they've changed my meds 4 times. They put me through medical treatments or medical tests. Nothing's changed. Nothing's wrong. But the blood pressure is skyrocketing for no reason. And so now I'm concerned. I thought, I wonder if they're doing the testing on this thing or if they hooked it up. So I'm going to have to somehow. Do you know who I would contact to get the reports of when they are testing this?
Maybe Carmen Krogh has an idea on that. Carmen, what do you think?
You might call the company themselves or the Ministry of Environment, or you'll have to be prepared that you might be shunted around.
No kidding.
Oh, sure, I will.
Yeah, but I would give the developer the first shot. Just to see what they have to say.
But you're close
to
you're close to the junction box. How close are you to the wind turbines themselves?
They're down the road. I'm not close to the wind turbines.
You're not close to them.
I can see them from my property.
Yeah.
I can see their lights and everything, but I'm in right beside. Like I can throw a snowball at this interconnect station. So I was just concerned, and I wondered if it was part of the public information thing that they have to give you information of when they're...
Well, you'll have to do some homework. Joyce, you'll have to do some homework on that and decide and see how much they'll tell you. Keep us informed about that. I'd be interested to hear more about it. Thanks very much for your call. Finding out information is incredibly difficult, isn't it?
Yes.
How about any of this?
It's parsed out to different ministries and so forth.
Yeah.
Although technically the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change now, they've renamed themselves, should be the central processor.
Yeah, you say should be.
Yes, but sometimes you get redirected.
Yes, I've noticed that myself. Okay. Carmen, thanks very much for coming in and giving us a look at it from your perspective. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dale.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Researcher Carmen Krogh, a founding member of the Society for Wind Vigilance.
On AM 740 Zoomer Radio. Gold Hawk Fights Back for You airs Monday to Friday, 11 to 1 on AM 740 Zoomer Radio.